Welcome to Fireside Giants. My name is Alex, my co-host here, Anthony Rivardo. And today we are going to look at Cor'Dale Flott, rookie cornerback for the Giants, coming out of LSU. Intriguing player, very wiry. He's small, 6'1", and 178 pounds. His first issue of business with this team is adding on some more muscle mass. The guy needs some size. He is a lanky guy. He is going to have some trouble tackling players at the next level. Because of that lack of functional strength. So right off the bat, he needs to get a little bit bigger, but he's an intriguing player. He has some really good experience against top talents, top wide receivers. He has a lot to say about Wan'Dale Robinson, who he faced off against last year when they played Kentucky. So some really good matchups there, iron sharpening iron type of situations. But this is a guy who we think could potentially play and end up stealing that starting nickel job. There are a couple players there, so we're going to discuss that, what he offers, what he bringing to this team, and the impact he could potentially make as a rookie. So, Anthony, before we dive into Cor'Dale Flott, how are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing great, and I really like Cor'Dale Flott as the second of the Giants' 2 third-round picks in the 2022 NFL Draft. And in my opinion, Cor'Dale Flott is like the perfect developmental prospect to draft in round 3 because he's tall enough to play on the outside, but he's too skinny to play on the outside. But he's got the speed to play in the slot, but eventually they might want to move him outside, and I think that day one he can probably compete in the slot, but he's got that frame that if it gets built out, as Alex mentioned, number one job for Cordell is to add that size, muscle mass, and weight. If he's able to put all those pounds on, he could eventually move outside and fill that huge hole that was left behind by James Bradberry. That's definitely a possibility for Cor'Dale Flott, but you really love the traits that he brings. I mean, he's got some speed to him. He's lanky, he's tall, and he played at a great university, DBU, LSU. I mean, they are just churning out defensive back talent every single year, especially in those middle rounds too. So you take a look at Cor'Dale Flott, and there are a lot of traits that you really like there, and the Giants cornerback position is pretty thin. They got some holes, they got some injuries too. Even some of the guys that were injured last year still a little bit hobbled. Darnay Holmes, Aaron Robinson haven't been on the practice field, so Dane Belton's been picking up the slack and getting some extra snaps. And Cor'Dale Flott eventually is going to get some extra snaps as well, and he could maybe impress over the summer and steal that starting nickel cornerback position. It's definitely a possibility. I love what he brings to the table, and I think this was a great developmental prospect that the Giants landed in the 3rd round.
Right. So, as you mentioned, there are a couple players at that slot position that are going to be competing for starting reps. Darnay Holmes, who we really like, we've heard a lot about him. Our guy, Brian Walker, trains him specifically. So, we've heard a lot of good things about him. He could transition to the outside. And I don't think that that's out of the question. I think Darnay Holmes could be given a chance to start outside. You look at guys like DJ Reed that just was signed to the Jets, a Seattle guy. He's like 5'9". He's a small guy, but he's a feisty one. And he's really good reaction timing. So Darnay Holmes kind of gives you those vibes. Maybe he can get a little bit better, maybe make that transition outside. Maybe it helps him a little bit, kind of being able to squeeze the boundary instead of being kind of left open in the middle of the field. So we could see a position battle going on the outside as well, with Aaron Robinson trying to make that transition away from the slot and nickel to that outside boundary corner. But Cor'Dale Flott projected as either a slot or a safety at the NFL level. We expect for him to be more of a slot guy because he doesn't have a big enough frame to be a box safety in the NFL, and he would only really be a free safety. But looking at his game last year, he gave up 249 yards and 2 touchdowns, picked up an interception. But what I liked about him the most was that he was only 20 years old last year, right? He's just turning 21 now, which is really, really good because, of course, his body isn't fully developed. His brain isn't fully developed. He's still taking steps forward in terms of just physicality, and he's so young. There's a lot of time and experience that he already has as a youngster that can translate to the next level. He ended up giving up 656 yards and 6 touchdowns back in 2020. And as I said before, 2021 only gave up 249 and 2 touchdowns. So he took a monstrous step forward. He only gave up 51% of his passes, and that's a 20% increase, or rather decrease from 71% in 2020. So I think the Giants saw that leap in development and were like, okay, clearly there's something going on here. He took such a big step. What is it? What exactly did he do differently? Was it his frame, his IQ? He's clearly learning very quickly. And I think that they saw what translates, and it really looks good for them. And looking at his snaps, he only spent 21 snaps in the deeper portions at free safety, 42 in the box, 178 out wide, and 357 in the slot. So he definitely projects as a slot guy for the Giants. Now, Anthony, do you think that this lack of functional strength is going to hold him back initially from making a significant impact in the NFL? Do you think that's going to be the primary catalyst behind maybe pushing him to a second stringer? Or do you think, it might not be an issue for him right away? Or do you think, that's the thing that's going to hold him back from getting that starting job?
I think that is the number one thing that's going to hold him back, just because I don't know if a coaching staff is going to trust a 175-pound cornerback to go compete like that. There's a lot of really big, strong wide receivers in the NFL nowadays, especially as the jumbo slot position is becoming more and more utilized around the league. So even if you put him into the slot, you can't guarantee that he's not going up against a 220 pounder. Sometimes tight ends, they flex over into the slot position. Gone are the days of the 5'8", 180-pound shifty slot receiver. That's not the most frequent alignment in the slot position anymore. You're seeing a lot of jumbo slot. You're seeing a lot of big guys. You'll even see Michael Thomas, a 6'3", 230-pound wide receiver who goes outside and then moves inside. And then what's Cordell going to do? He's got 50 pounds less on him, right? He's 50 pounds lighter. So it's kind of hard for his coaching staff to take a look at a guy this skinny and be like, yeah, he can size up and match up well with these guys. But you have to admit, he does have the speed and he does have the instincts. When you watch him on film, he's a very smart cornerback, and that's where he gets himself into that third round mix. That's how he became a third round prospect, because he's very smart and he is a good, talented player. There's just a lot of work to do. And then the other thing that could hold him back from getting a starting position in year one, the competition. We mentioned that there are some injuries out there, but there are some players competing alongside him. You've got Darnay Holmes, you've got Aaron Robinson, and Aaron Robinson is one of those players that is really physical. And in this physical Wink Martindale defense, it's going to run a lot of man coverage and a lot of press. So you need some strong cornerbacks. And Aaron Robinson, if he's healthy, is the stronger cornerback. So there's a good chance that he gets more of the run in the slot and outside, because I know that they're trying to transition Aaron Robinson to play on the outside, as I expect them to hopefully do with Cor'Dale Flott one day. But Cor'Dale Flott at 175 pounds is very light. He needs to add muscle mass to his frame. You take a look at anywhere, the Draft Network, NFL.com, and Pro Football Focus, PFF lists where does he need to improve? Muscle mass. That's his number one thing that he needs to improve. And when you look at his relative athletic score, he's got good testing traits on the athleticism side, but the size score is not so good because he's so light. And that really is the number one thing that's going to hold him back, whether it holds him back on the field or in the practice field. If the coaching staff just looks at him and says, this guy is too skinny, we can't start him yet, it might take Cordell maybe a year to develop, put on that muscle mass, put on that functional strength, and be able to compete as a press cornerback. And then maybe in year two, the Giants coaching staff looks at him, says, we trust him so much better. He's closer to 200. He really put on the pounds. And now we're ready to see him compete out wide, and we're ready to see him continue to compete in the slot. I think that's really the main thing for Cordell. As you mentioned, you just got to put on more size, and then you can compete way more at both boundary corner and on the inside.
Right. And you look at Darnay Holmes, he's 198 pounds. He's not a big guy. You look at him, he looks like a small guy. He's 198 pounds. He's 20 pounds heavier than Cor'Dale Flott. So I'm mainly concerned because if you're playing a nickel position in the NFL, you're also expected to be a good run defender. You need to step up in the running game. You need to help. And he's going to get bullied in the running game. He's going to get moved. He's going to be hidden behind anyone that's remotely bigger. So it's not a good position for him to be in right now. He needs to get up to about, I'd say, 190 for him to be like a good enough run stopper where he can play the slot position daily. I would not be surprised to see Dane Belton getting some slot reps because of that physicality, because of his zone capabilities. In man coverage, if they're going to be running man, I think, Cor'Dale Flott, definitely a bouncy cornerback. He can really hold it down in man. But I think if they're going to be running more of a hybrid zone system, if they're running zone, let's say 40-50% of the time, you're going to see Dane Belton on the field with Xavier McKinney and Julian Love, because Julian Love is also a good nickel corner. We haven't even mentioned him yet. Who's to say that Julian Love doesn't get a lot of snaps in that slot role as well, because he has experience there and he's better at cornerback than he was a safety going into the NFL. Maybe they want to translate him back to that. So I'm definitely interested to see how they attack Cor'Dale Flott in terms of utilizing him now. I don't think he's ready yet to be an impact player. Could he steal a starting job? Absolutely, but he needs to add more weight. Like I said, he's young. He's 21 years old now, so he's got time. He's definitely got that as a variable on his side. But how do you think, like you mentioned, he could end up adding that weight and moving to the outside. There's a possibility there, but maybe there's an argument to be had that he should be competing on the outside now with Aaron Robinson. Maybe he shouldn't be considered a slot cornerback right now. I know he was primarily playing that, with LSU last year. But what do you think about him competing for the boundary right now and not even considering the slot?
I think it's interesting to kind of project him as the boundary guy when he hasn't played on the boundary. I think that's kind of the main problem is the lack of experience. In college, he primarily played in the slot. So entering the NFL, I think that's where he's going to have to play. Darnay Holmes had the reverse when he was playing in college. He primarily played on the boundary, but then they looked at him. They're like, oh, he's too small, a little skinny and a little short. He was 5'10", 190, as Alex just mentioned, and they thought that he was too small to play on the outside, so they moved him on the inside. And then you look at Cordell, and he's 6'1", 175. He's definitely too small to play on the outside if you're using that same logic that you had with Darnay Holmes. So you're just going to have to put him into the slot until he develops. And I don't think that it would be a good idea for him to start going on the outside and pressing up against strong wide receivers right away. I mean, you put him on the practice field with Kenny Galladay. Kenny Galladay, I know he didn't have the best 2021 season, but he is a big 6'4" physical wide receiver. He is going to really dominate against a skinny guy like Cor'Dale Flott. He's just got way too much strength on him. And I think that's the main issue for Cordell, as we mentioned. It's the weight. And I like what he brings to the table in terms of his play recognition. I think that's probably his best thing, Cordell. He's got really good play recognition. When you watch him, he's very good at keeping his eyes on the quarterback and kind of jumping in those zones. And I think that's something that works really well for a slot guy, again. But I just don't see him competing on the outside day one just because he doesn't have the muscle mass.
Right. So I'll give you guys a couple of quotes to wrap up the episode, just so you kind of have an idea of what his mentality is going into this. Like I said before, they have kind of him and Cordell and Wandale have did I say that right? Cordell and Wandale. That was totally like brain farted me out. Wow. They have competed against each other in the past. And Cordell actually said that Wandale was one of the best receivers he's ever faced, and vice versa. So really interesting there. This is basically what Cor'Dale Flott had to say about it regarding specifically covering Wandale during practice. He said it was nice. Like we said on the 30 visits, iron sharpens iron. It's a thing I've got to get used to. He's an elite receiver. Throughout practice, he's going to be one of the guys that will help me get better. And so far, Wandale has been showing out. He had a couple touchdowns in red zone drills the other day, and that's definitely a good sign for Giants fans because we have been dying for more touchdowns, and Wandale seems to be a guy that can produce those. So I'm excited to see how they get him more involved during live action. Flott went on to say, specifically, the question is, how often do you find yourself surprising guys out there with how physical you are despite being slenderly built? And he said, I've been doing this all my life, being built like this, growing up, playing this game of football, everybody telling me I'm too small to do it. So far, I just focus on making an impact to the team. Right now, working on gaining weight, being able to take my body and being able to fit it wherever it is needed for the defense. So clearly, he's trying to add some weight. Specifically, he said, I can probably add 5 to 10 pounds, whatever is comfortable for me to be able to perform. So adding the weight, but maintaining his bounciness, maintaining his ability to change direction and his reactions, that's going to be like the threshold, seeing where does that decrease? How much weight can I put on and before I start to see decreases in agility and speed? So that's where I really keep an eye on those things specifically. But looking at some of his metrics, he had an above average 81st percentile 20-yard shuttle. His 40-yard dash is a 4.52, so not great. His measurables aren't great, but again, like he's trying to improve some of those. Arm length is below average. Hand size is 8 inches. Tiny little hands. His Girl Scout cookie hands. So really, really interesting. Little tiny hands. It's actually like crazy because Wandale's hands were 9 inches, and he has the smallest hands in the entire draft class, right? So him having 8-inch hands, I mean, that's actually like surprising. I didn't think that was even possible. Vertical jump below average at 34 inches. Broad jump 10 feet 2 inches. It's about average. 3 cone a little bit above average. So, overall, he's not the most like physically imposing player, but I think it's more about his like mentality, his awareness, change of direction. He has some of the stuff you want in a man coverage corner. I assume the Giants, Wink Martindale, like specific traits for man coverage, and it is the change of directions a big one, and the catch up speed, the makeup speed. And just like the reaction timing, because ultimately, if you have guys running slants, you guys running like up and outs or whatever it might be, you need to have guys who are going to be able to react accordingly and stop those passes, especially if the ball's getting out of their hands of the quarterback quickly. I think Flott does have some of those skill sets that will translate to the next level. But guys, would love to hear your opinions below on Cor'Dale Flott in the comments. Definitely an interesting player, needs to add some size, but some upside there. Do you think he'll be a starter immediately, or do you think he'll be more of a reserve guy? There are some names in front of him. Like Julian Love. Of course, you have Darnay Holmes, Aaron Robinson. I think he'll be a boundary guy, but we'll see. As always, much love for tuning into Fireside Giants. Make sure to like and subscribe below, and we'll catch you guys on the next episode.